Year 2 didn't go exactly as I had hoped. From 9-3 to 6-6, we've lost 2 bowl games, and this has to be fixed. It all starts with the school budget. I had already recorded this portion before getting some help, but I think next year we'll go up 5% on recruiting and training, letting the discipline go down to 20 in year 4. Or I might just put those 10% into training alone. The past 2 seasons we've only had 2 issues with players, both happening on the day of the bowl game. We'll have to wait and see if lowering it down to 20% has a significant impact on the team. Moving on to players that are leaving, not just graduating, Desmond O'Neal has decided he wanted to transfer to FIU. My response to that is take out the I, and that's what I think. Oddly enough, after looking back through the footage, O'Neal never committed to us in the offseason. He wasn't recruited during the season, and I can find him in the signings list at the end of the recruiting period, but he never officially committed during the offseason. He was the 3rd corner on the team, which meant he had some playtime this season, and with his 99 speed, I don't see a reason we can't fit him in at other positions in his sophomore year. I did attempt to talk him into staying with the team using 21 of my week 1 points, which persuaded him to think on it, but I didn't want to have that kind of speed leave. I ended up adding 24 more points, 45 in total, to bring him back next season, and he agreed to return, but will be short on points for our first week of recruiting. Now it's time to say goodbye to the graduating class. Dan Moses is the best player on this list that will be moving on. His replacement next season will be Stanchek, but it'll be hard to replace this kind of talent at the position. He was a first team All Big East my first year with the team, fell down to second team, but that was more due to the fact that he was injured. He broke his tailbone 6 weeks into the season, but finished the year on the starting roster. The injury didn't seem to have hurt his draft stock, as he ended up going to the Miami Dolphins in the first round, 17th overall. He is our first round selection in this series. Last season we had 2 players in Jamil Dye and Mike Lorello who were both 3rd round picks. Next up is Eric Wicks. He ended up getting a first team All Big East in his first year as a starter on this roster after sitting and getting some reps behind Lorello. Between you and me, I think Wicks might have been the better strong safety. He wasn't selected as high as Lorello, going in the 5th round by the Miami Dolphins. I'm beginning to think we might be a pipeline to this team. The 2 players aren't that far off from each other, skill-wise. I think Miami got a great value pick with Wicks. Jason Colson was a player I brought back for his final season. He had thought about going pro in his junior year, but I felt like his skill set wasn't polished enough and that another year would do him good. During this year, he earned a second team All Big East for the 2nd consecutive season. Got over 1,000 yards on the ground, and I think at this point he's a shoo-in for the 1st round selection. Believe it or not, he's not even going into the draft. I looked up and down the entire roster and free agents, and he was not in the draft class. I guess he found a different passion in his life. Jeremy Hines will be leaving after his senior year, improving upon his 2nd team All Big East by going first team this season. His backup behind him was Napier, which isn't too bad of a drop-off, but this will be a position that we'll have to look into recruiting. I shouldn't be too surprised, but Hines also didn't make it in the NFL. There are hundreds of teams. I'm sure the game can't put everyone in it. That might be the reason why Colson didn't get in. We have our All-American Jeremy Sheffy, who's moving on from the team. It was quite surprising to see him so highly regarded, but the stats do not lie. He needs to open an IHOP with all the pancakes he's giving out. Only gave up 2 sacks as well, not bad for a guy who missed close to half of his junior year with a broken tailbone. I talked about how this interior offensive line will be very different going into year 3. We don't have anyone behind him that we can reliably put in. The hope is that Chris Hunter can plug himself into the spot as a true freshman and take over. This caught me by surprise, but Jeremy Sheffy did get drafted. 7th round selection by Washington with the 19th pick. I think this is a steal, taking a flyer out on an all-American and hoping it works out. And that was also the last player who went pro. I talked about how our top receivers will be gone this season. Rashawn Bolden is one of those players. A red zone threat with decent hands and speed, but he's not a playmaker unless he's in the red zone. Kevin McLee was a 2-year starter under my coaching in this series. He was one of our best players on defense in terms of impact stats. While looking him up, I found out he was signed by the St. Louis Rams as an undrafted free agent. He was released after being caught for a drug delivery, and that he was involved in a bank robbery back in 2016. In 2020, he had passed away at the age of 36, and I couldn't find the reason why, but that seems too young. Craig Wilson will be graduating. He's been a solid source of production as a defensive tackle. He wasn't the starter at the position. Dykes was that guy and will continue to be that going into his final year of eligibility. We do need to pick up someone else to fill in his absence on the roster. The other receiver that is leaving is Joe Hunter. Nothing about his ratings really stand out. He was a mediocre player, but that's the reason why we leaned so much on the running game. We didn't have the weapons, but next season we'll be getting a new toy to play with in our 4-star recruit, Anthony Brown. Jay Henry is another starter that wasn't the most athletic at the position, but he did have some traits that were good. His jumping and tackling, a good rapper, is what every guy needs. Along with his tall frame to knock down passes, the drop off with him leaving won't be too noticeable. Abraham wasn't the most impactful player on the field. Only 1 interception on the season. The defense was missing Jamil Adai in the secondary, and with Abraham leaving, there isn't much behind him that'll make me think the position will be better. At least not right away. I don't know if we come back against Texas in the Houston Bowl if Palmer was starting instead of Thomas. His catching doesn't make me think he would have made the catch. He is more of a traditional blocker tight end in his final season. Who knows, maybe he would have been like Colson and had a phenomenal night. Warren Young was one of our 3 decent defensive ends that we have on the roster. Decent tackler, good strength, not the fastest, but got the job done. That's all I can ask for. Next year, this position will have 2 seniors only. I'm going to have to do some recruiting. Eric Phillips, what can I say? He had a total of 3 carries since I took over. There were 3 better players above him. Unfortunately, not every player is going to get playing time. Another player that had little to no playing time, Travis McClintock. Joined to be a football team, stayed to sing country roads. Justin Dziak was a backup to one of the greatest fullbacks in this program's history, Schmitty. I think he knew he wasn't going to be a starter. The strong safety position is stacked on this team. We had Lorello, Wicks, Malik will be next up to prove his worth. Then Mountaineers, way on the bottom, Akeem Jackson sits as the worst rated player at the position. He was a senior and didn't get any playing time. He's going to graduate knowing he didn't have a chance, and that's okay. Let's check out how the year went for our players in the NFL. Jamil Adai ended up getting most of the playing time in Chicago. The 3rd round pick had 59 tackles and 7 pass deflections. He didn't have any interceptions but did manage to recover a fumble. His rating didn't improve over the season. In fact, his tackling went down while his awareness went up. He's a free safety. Tackling isn't as important as playmaking, in my opinion. Let's see if he takes a leap next season. Our best player in year 1 was Mike Lorello. He was drafted later than Adai, but in the same round, his awareness improved by 3 over the season, picking up his overall by 1. He had 38 tackles, 1 interception, and a sack. It looks like both our alumni are making instant impacts on their teams. This offseason, the priority, based on the roster breakdown, is wide receiver and defensive end. Both of those positions will be below the recommended requirements. This does include the in-season recruiting. That's what the green check mark where it says new prospect represents before progressing through the next 5 weeks. The second priority for me is to fill positions where there aren't any freshmen, and that means positions like quarterback, tackle, defensive end, defensive tackle, middle linebacker, kicker, and punter. If you're wondering about guard and center, like the wideout position, we already have some new recruits for the season that's committed. Let's fast forward to the first week. No players were committed to the team. That's to be expected. I did pique some interest from a few players. Steve Watson was one of them. Pat McAfee is the punter, but we don't have anyone behind him. Yeah, he's a 1-star, but a good program should be able to develop 1-stars into serviceable players. I decided to send the house to him after finding out that he responded positively to our location. Was it overkill? Sure, but I had the points to spend. Another player who was positive about our location was West Virginia's own Derek Washington. He's only a 2-star athlete, but we do need some players at guard behind Stanchek and the freshman Chris Hunter in case of injuries throughout the year. I sent the house to him, and since he was close by, it didn't cost too much. Justin Moses was interested in the team. Considering he's not too far off from West Virginia, it's not hard to see why he finds the location a positive. 2-star middle linebacker. It's just to fill a position that doesn't have any freshmen, and we can hopefully develop him for the future. I sent the house. The last person we were able to find a positive in was Jerome Goins. He's an athlete, so we can plug him into any position that he best fits. He likes the location, but we didn't have the points to send the house. Instead, I personally went to his home and talked to him about becoming a Mountaineer. That was more than enough, and he committed to West Virginia. His raw skill attributes were off the charts. I felt that just looking at his skills that he would be a decent wide receiver. He is a 2-star recruit, so do temper your expectations. Looking at his real attributes, his speed isn't fast enough to play in the secondary or as a receiver, and his tackling isn't good enough to be a linebacker. His blocking isn't good either, which means he can't be a tight end or fullback. Breaking the tackle isn't that high, running back is out of the question, but he has a good arm. Not the strongest or the best accuracy. I plan to redshirt him his freshman year, and I can see him developing into something in this offense. We still have 3 more weeks of recruiting. Steve Watson didn't commit even after sending the house, and that soured me. I ended up just telling my assistant to call him. Derek Washington also didn't commit. He's much cheaper, and I sent the house again. Justin Moses as well didn't commit. I sent the house on him, and the reason I'm spending so much on him, he has 4.4 speed. I'm not giving up on that. We can train him to be a 5-star player. You cannot train him to be faster. A new name on here is Reggie Bennett. He proved me wrong that you can get negative pitches. I just wish it wasn't so hurtful. He did not like my coaching prestige. I don't like the fact that he's a 2-star, but I'm reaching out anyways. Another new name, this time with a positive outcome, Steve Harris. He likes our coaching style, and with only 2 defensive ends at the position currently, we really need some depth. I sent the house. And the last player this week is Donald Bozeman. We already recruited 1 wide receiver this season, but we still need another player to fill the required minimum. He is a 3-star player, the highest player this offseason that I found a positive pitch towards. I couldn't send the house, but I did do an in-home visit. We got 2 commitments this week. Steve Harris will fill out the depth at defensive end, something that we really need, and there's a big possibility that he may not be redshirted due to the lack of depth at the spot. He has very good speed, and his acceleration is even better. He's a speed rusher that we can use. We certainly have lacked in the pass rush department last season. It also helps that his jumping is pretty high at a 76. Could also bat down a few passes at the line. The other player that committed was Steve Watson. Obviously, he's going to be redshirted. The only reason he was recruited was to have depth behind McAfee next year. You can see why he was a 1-star punter. This man really didn't commit after I sent the house. I should send him back to his mama. He's terrible, but hopefully we can improve him. There's 2 more weeks to go for the recruiting period. Here are some more names. Matt McCarty is a 1-star defensive end. With Steve Harris now on the team, it would be nice to have players behind him to develop for the future. Donnie McDowell is another new name during the recruiting period. He's a 2-star athlete who's also from West Virginia. His height and weight means he won't be a lineman, but it doesn't hurt taking a chance on some of these players. Justin Moses, fast. I like fast. I send house. We still haven't found another guard who can find a positive thing about our program. Washington was sent the house. A new name, Ben Brady, a 5-star blue chip wide receiver. He hates us. Doesn't like the coach prestige. I was punching above my weight here, but I took the chance anyways. This week's commitments are here, and the first one is Donnie McDowell. He has decent speed on paper, but everything else about him is not too impressive. He does indeed have decent speed, but he's about as advertised, not really impressive in anything, possibly quarterback, but with Jerome Goins taking that position, it might be better to move McDowell to another position. And the only other one that is also a 65 rating, wide receiver. We did need one, and this would help get us over the minimum. A name that hasn't popped up because, well, he hadn't had a positive response. Justin McMahon. There's a lot of jokes I can say here. Instead, speed! He's fast. Very fast. I like fast. Problem is, everything else about him isn't that great. These also are not his true attributes. Sometimes they're higher or lower, and I'm curious to see if he really does have a sub 4.2. Turns out he lied about his speed. He's still fast, but not as fast as I had hoped. There's also not a lot about him that I like. He has okay passing accuracy, but has a noodle for an arm, can't block, can't tackle, can't even catch. I'll let the game decide for me, and it shows running back. I can understand it. Athletic enough to make defenders miss, but on occasion can break a tackle. We got him. We finally got him. It took 4 weeks and 3 houses, but we got Justin Moses. He might end up getting redshirted his first season on the team, but I look forward to developing him. I think we got a gem in this kid. 85 speed and 80 tackling. Give him a year or 2 to develop, and I can see him being a huge impact on the team. I can see him in the NFL. I can see him doing his AARP application. He's got a future. The last commitment this week is a 1-star tackle, Wesley Powell. We needed depth at the position. That's what Powell will provide. He's not a great blocker, average at best, but his strength is pretty good, sitting at an 85. The hope is he can continue to build on that strength. He might get redshirted his first year, depends how the position looks before the start of the season. We're on to the final week of recruiting. Matt McCarty is going to get an in-home visit by me. A new name, Caleb Carter, appears. Last week we were able to get depth at tackle. This week we have a chance to increase the depth at guard. He really likes the program's prestige. Initially, I was going to give him an in-home visit from the assistant coach, but I changed my mind and will visit him personally. There's another athlete on the board. James Hollins is a smart guy in the group. He's really interested in the academics, which I respect. Another situation where I was originally going to send an assistant coach for an in-home visit, but instead made the visit personally. It's the final week. I have to do the best I can to get these players. Every week I keep sending the house to this man, and every week he keeps trying to stretch this as long as he can. Well, it's the final week. Either I wasted my time trying to recruit Derek Washington, or I spent way too much time recruiting a 2-star guard. It feels like a loss either way. Here are the final commitments, and the first player is 4-star running back William Carty. You're probably wondering, why didn't you talk about him? I didn't talk about him because I didn't think he'd commit to the team at all. I must have lucked out on the final week of the year picking the right choice. Obviously, he's going to be redshirted his first year. We have way too much talent in front of him already. He has a 78 rating, which seems a bit high, but he has decent carrying, good agility and acceleration, not the best breaking tackle, but overall the foundation is there. I think he can develop to be a good back on this team. James Holland has committed to the team. He's pretty solid on paper. He's a 2-star athlete, so temper expectations. He's not the fastest, not the quickest, not the best at anything really. We should all know by now that most of these low-star athletes are a coin flip. Sometimes you get a stud and sometimes you get a developmental player. The best position for him would be wide receiver, also expect him to be redshirted. We finally got the son of a bitch. We got Derek Washington. He ended up being way better than I expected. I can see him in a few seasons becoming a starter for the team. His blocking and strength are all in the 80s, and I would say he's a steal, but he took 5 weeks to recruit. Took points that I could have used to recruit other players. The final recruit was Matt McCarty. This was nothing more than just a depth recruitment. There's really not much about him that really stands out, but he's a body. Before we go over the roster, last year we were able to get an early commitment from 4-star center Scott Rowland. The plan is to redshirt him his first season, but I'm debating that with the idea that injuries can wreck our season at any time. He's currently the second best center on the team. We'll have to wait till after spring training to decide. He's already really good, but I want him to start next season. Another early recruitment was from another 4-star prospect, this time at wide receiver Anthony Brown. He has very good speed, but his hands aren't that great. I wouldn't be surprised if I redshirted him as well his first year. I also wouldn't be surprised if he's the 3rd or 4th best player at the position who could get some playing time. We'll have to wait and see. The final recruitment and the best player in the entire recruiting class, the 5-star guard Chris Hunter from Aiken, South Carolina. 80 overall, he's an instant starter on the team. He'll be paired up with Stanchik on the interior line. I do think the line will be a strength in another season or two. Gwaltney must be salivating. Season 3 is inching closer and the Mountaineers are the lowest they've ever been in this series to start the year, 57th. There's not a lot of confidence in West Virginia to succeed this coming season. They're also ranked 3rd in their own conference, the Big East, behind Connecticut and Pittsburgh. Keep in mind, the only team they haven't beaten in this conference is Pittsburgh. The coach was riding high after his first year with the team, but the second year wasn't as successful, only beating one team in the top 25, 3-5 against rivals, and losing both bowl appearances. This could be the make or break season for his career. I said last season there was going to be a new scheme. There's going to be a new scheme. The run-heavy approach has been detrimental to the health of my running backs the past 2 years. I'm opting to go with a lighter workload instead of a 72-28 split. We'll lower it down to a 62-38 split, while also rotating more players in and out of the lineup. On defense, this team had one of the worst pass coverages ever. I don't think it was the players' fault, and with the idea that if they're going to give up big plays, might as well get aggressive with it. Change the scheme to be more aggressive, but everything else will stay the same. Let's see how that works out this season. The best player on the team continues to be Owen Schmidt. That's no surprise. He's in his final year of eligibility as a senior, will be graduating at the end of the season, but will he also be drafted is the question that I want to know. Even though he's a fullback, there's not a lot of blocking he does on the team. He's more of an extra running back, not like the team doesn't already have enough of those. You'll see in a bit. Walter White is the second best player on the team. It's interesting how he'll be used when he goes pro. He's not very fast, but he's very quick and powerful. He's not the type of back to avoid a tackle and take it all the way, but he is the type of player who will break everyone on his way to the end zone. I'm curious to see if he's going to return or go pro early at the end of this year. The last elite player on the roster is Pernell Williams. He sat behind Colson and Gwaltney the past 2 seasons, waiting waiting for his time to shine. Obviously, he's going to continue to sit behind Gwaltney, but that doesn't change the fact that he'll be able to improve his skills. It's been fantastic for the team the past 3 seasons to have elite backs with good backups behind them, especially for such a run-heavy team like the Mountaineers. One more player and impact player, Pat McAfee. Nothing much changed on him in terms of yeeting ability. He's still an impact player, I don't know why, and I'd rather have that on a defensive player. I always feel bad about seniors on the team that don't get a chance to finish their collegiate career as a starter. Both Thomas and Bednarik had every bit of a chance to start for this team in year 1 as Pat White did, but I went with the youngest player. Behind those two are Sowers and Brown. One of them will most likely take over the team during their senior years once White leaves after year 4. While way at the bottom, Jerome's going to sit on the bench as he'll be redshirted his first year, and at this point, the team will be eventually, pending on if anyone better joins, will have to be relying on Goins in the future. There are currently 8 running backs on the roster at the moment. The most important is Gwaltney and Williams, but after that, we have a new recruit, William Carty, who will be sitting out as a redshirt. With the luxury of having 2 elite running backs on the roster, and one of which is still a junior, I can let players behind develop without losing the eligibility. Slayton will be the 3rd back on the depth chart, and if you noticed, Hartman is a new name on the list. I thought I was losing my mind seeing him there, and it turns out he was at a junior college before. Now he's on our roster. Well, that's neat. We already know that Schmitty is the starter at fullback. Behind him, Coley looks to be primed to take over the position once he leaves after this season. There's hope that he can develop to be decent after this year and some training camp experience. The wide receivers group is completely different this season with Vaughn, Rivers, and Tito Gonzalez in the lineup. Bolden, Hunter, and McClintock graduated in the offseason. One of the biggest surprises to me is the rise of Jallo to the number 3 spot. After him is Dawson's Creek. From there on out, every player is a freshman that's been redshirted. Anthony Brown will be sitting out his freshman year. He's got speed, but we don't need to rush him in when there's so many better players in front of him. Same can be said about Hollins and McDowell. No need to rush their development. One player who did surprise me was the Bryant Kendrick. I don't know who he is because I don't know how he got on the team, but I decided not to redshirt him. He's not good. Development isn't going to help him much. Plus, he'll be an emergency player if we lose one of our top 4 guys. Everyone remembers Sabry Thomas. The drop he had in the Houston Bowl may have cost them the win. Redshirt freshman in his first big game. The lights may have been too bright on the biggest game of his career, but he has 3 more seasons to come in clutch. Behind him is Williams, who has improved, but let's not fool ourselves. Thomas will be the starter until he leaves. John Bradshaw is becoming incredibly good. Behind him at the other position is a toss-up. As much as I am a Bass man, I have to go with Rucker. He has more upside at the position than Bassler does. It's nice to have decent depth that can be relied upon, but if Bradshaw does go down, we're Powell will be sitting his freshman year as a redshirt. Again, better players in front, no need to rush. Another position that has changed drastically due to graduations. Both Moses and Sheffy are gone. Stanchik and Hunter are in as starters. I know it says Hunter is a left guard, but I forgot to change the position in the offseason. You can't change them after, so for this year, he'll be labeled a left guard. I did think about redshirting Washington, but the thought that an injury could happen and he'd have to come in crept into my mind. It would be a better idea to redshirt him, but he's going to be a true freshman backup. This will be Napier's final season with the team. He'll get the opportunity to show his worth to the NFL. Behind him is true freshman Scott Rowland. I didn't redshirt him for the same reason I didn't redshirt Washington. Injuries can happen at any time, and I want to have someone ready, and it doesn't hurt to give him a few reps here and there since he'll be taking over next season. Moving over to the defensive side, both Dingle and Wright will be gone after this season. It feels like a lot of these key pieces this year will be gone. It'll be Wright's first year as a starter. This is also another position where I forgot to change them them in the offseason, and we're now stuck with 4 right ends. Doesn't change anything. Dingle and Wright will be the starters, Harris will be the backup. While I considered redshirting McCarty, I didn't like the idea of having little depth here and an injury forcing an out-of-position player to rotate in, so we'll be keeping McCarty in as a true freshman, but he might get redshirted next year as a sophomore. The defensive line will be completely revamped next season, as both starters, Dykes and Liebig, will be gone after this season. There's also nobody behind them, as I wasn't able to recruit anyone to prepare for the future. On a positive note, Liebig had a big improvement over his previous season. It may be his final year, but he's going out strong. Hathaway and Wilson will be the starters at the outside linebacker positions, another position where the starters will be gone after this season. There's more speed here, and I'm a huge fan of fast linebackers. Behind them both, Webb and Burns have 80 speed. I feel like the future will be fine for this position with those guys lying in wait. Surprisingly, this position is better now than it was last season, but once again, the starter, Magro, will be gone after this season. Every position on defense up to this point will be replaced next season. Since we're in year 3, basically the roster that was built before I was here has grown up and will be leaving. That being said, the guy behind will be redshirted with the hopes that in the offseason he can train to be the starter. His speed is too good not to hand him the position next year. If you thought this position looked good last year, well, it got a heck of a lot better this year. Griffith is looking like a future All-American at this position. O'Neal returning after considering leaving, moving up to the number 2 spot. Tolbert looking like a good nickel corner, while Nelson will be in the dime position. Keep in mind, all of those 4 were freshmen last year. This is a position that I built in one season and it looks dominant. We shouldn't have as much trouble covering the pass like we did last year. Another position that's filled with my hand-picked players. In this case, that's not a better thing, but give Thomas another season or 2 and I think he'll be serviceable in the spot. We're still looking for a player with the talent of Lorello, but I'm not sure we'll ever find that again for a while. Would you look at that? The final position on defense, where the starters will be leaving. Well, actually both the starter and the backup will be leaving. Malik has improved drastically over the season, and the team has found some really good talent at strong safety the past 3 years. But that might come to an end this year when he and Mountaineers leave. Burden is currently the only player left that will be returning, and like the free safety spot, it could get better, but it'll take a couple of seasons. It's always nice to see a position group get better over time. Kozlowski took the starting job after switching positions and sitting his first year. He looked okay as a redshirt freshman, but here's hoping his sophomore season goes better. If not, there's always someone behind looking to prove their worth. How this bozo continues to be an impact player is beyond me. He didn't even improve much over the previous season. His backup Watson will be redshirted, but let's be honest, he ain't starting any year soon. We'll need to look for another punter in the offseason. Before we move on to the start of the season, I briefly wanted to show the breakdown of the roster. Our positional needs are center, defensive end, defensive tackle, outside linebacker, and strong safety. We can only select 12 players with the in-season recruiting, so expect at least 2 players at each position. In fact, here are the 12 players. My plan is to fill the needs now so that we can recruit the best we can regardless of position in the off-season. There will be 11 games for the season, then the bowl game if we get one again this year. I like keeping it at 11 even though we can add more games, which is what the open weeks are on the schedule. I kept them open, but it did change the first 2 games to be against the 2 worst teams in the NCAA. Change number 5 Maryland to number 107 Rice. Then we changed Ball State to number 102 Navy. The 2 worst teams based on overall ratings. Let's start the season. The first week of the year is our usual bye week before we go and take on Navy in the home opener, and this should be an easy win. They won 35-14, but not before being down 13-14 at the end of the first half. What I find interesting is that Thompson was in at quarterback during the 4th quarter. I'm not sure if White was injured in the game or if there was another reason. Either way, both quarterbacks did pretty well, seeing as White carried the ball 15 times. That makes me think he got injured, injured, but more shocking was how little Gwaltney was used in this game compared to the past 2 previous seasons. The scheme is working. Not only is he a threat on the ground, he's also a threat in the air, and our new number 1 receiver, Vaughn Rivers, put up a good performance. It looks like we did have an injury, but it wasn't Pat White. Instead, it was backup left tackle Lewis Davis. I'm not sure how he got injured, but it's not a huge deal at the moment. I did say if Bradshaw went down, we'd be so looks like Davis took the injury instead. We're on to our second game of the year, and that'll be against the Rice Owls. Another game on paper we should dominate. This time we didn't trail at any point in this game and came away with an easy win and a 2-0 start to the season. There's a stark difference in Pat White this season. He's being allowed to throw more, and it's working. Our secondary has also shut down the passing game for the second straight week. Gwaltney is back to carrying the bulk of the load and rewarding the team with a 5.9 yard per carry, along with his 3 touchdowns. The one thing that does concern me is that they were steamrolled on the ground this week. I think this is fine, because if you're down by 21 and you need to score fast, running isn't going to cut it. I'd rather be chewed up on the ground than in the air. Our offense is more than good enough to put it out of reach. There will be another bye week after having our cakewalk to start the season, but from here on out, we still have our 7 conference matchups. During this week off, we decided to drop 2 players from our recruiting list this season. Kyle Smith is the first one. We already have 2 freshman defensive ends on the roster this season, but we still need a potential starter for next year. This 4-star athlete would have been great to have, but clearly we were the least interesting team to him. I decided to give up on him. The other player was 4-star defensive end BJ Willis. Same thing, he had us near the bottom of the list. I don't think he wants to come here, and I'd rather use those scouting points on players who do. I gave up on him as well. Week 5 is here, and it'll be against Rutgers. Our first conference matchup in the season, and based on ratings, we have the advantage, but I'll say their defense is identical to ours. What's not identical is how poor their rush offense is compared to ours. This should be a win if our defense can stuff their run. It was close for a while in the first half, but the floodgates opened in the second and Rutgers couldn't recover. I talked about how their defense is identical to ours. I must have been talking about our defense from last year, because Pat White made their secondary look like Swiss cheese. It's also nice to see our pass defense isn't giving up close to 300 yards a game. Gwaltney had over 100 on the ground, but no touchdowns. This new scheme is really working well for this team. Like I predicted, the defense stuffed their running game. Both Rivers and Gonzalez had proven that they're pretty good receivers. I don't talk defense much, but Magro had himself a game. 10 tackles, 6 for loss, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble. Somewhere out there, a guy is tattooing his name right above his ass crack. It looked like I made the right choice to let BJ Willis go. He was gracious enough to let us down easy, at least. There was another recruit that I gave up on. 5-star outside linebacker Dennis Douglas. Double D is a good athlete, but he has us at the bottom of his list. The team already has 2 players ready to take over next season at this position. It's not an urgent need, but we still need to find depth at this spot. We're now 1/3 the way through the season, and with this game against Syracuse, last year I thought this game was going to be an easy win and they blew the Mountaineers away. I'm not taking this game lightly. Conference games are wild. Let's see if they can get revenge against them this year. Syracuse scored 49 points last year. West Virginia put up 56. No better way to get revenge than to say, hey, I saw what you did. I can do better. The secondary wasn't doing much in terms of stopping the passing game, giving up over 400 in the air, but one thing I said was that shootouts might end up happening with this new scheme, and Pat White casually dropping 6 touchdowns. Gwaltney almost had 300 yards on the ground. This team is about as balanced as it can be at the moment. I'm beginning to think we're unstoppable. That dominant win got us in the top 25 for the first time since last year in week 2. Do we deserve to be here? Probably not. We've mostly beaten weak teams, but time will tell if we deserve it. We've had our first recruit drop us this season, and that's 3-star center Aaron Freeman. He was a depth recruitment, someone to sit behind Roland. It's not a huge deal, we can find someone else. Here's another game where on paper it looks like we should blow them away. USF isn't particularly good at anything, and this West Virginia team is running on all cylinders right now. I say this because last season they just scraped on by thanks to a missed 2-point conversion at the end of the game. Can the Mountaineers do better this time out, or can USF work their magic to pull off an upset? This is feeling like a different team. Last year it felt like they were just struggling to get through games. This year it feels like they're stomping a mud hole against every team they played so far. Pat White had himself a 3-touchdown performance, close to 200 in the air. They also held USF to under 60 yards in the air. Both Gwaltney and Williams had over 100 yards in the game. It looks like Gwaltney might have been banged up, forcing Williams in. You can see the difference between a 95 rated running back over a 90. Oh, and this defense also had 9 sacks. You heard that right, 9. This is what peak performance looks like. That win has pushed them up to the number 18th spot in the rankings. This might be the best this team has performed in this entire series. You probably noticed that Tito Gonzalez was injured. He'll be out for 3 weeks, not too long, and it turns out that Gwaltney wasn't injured, which is even better news. Though there is a lack of depth at the wide receiver position, since I redshirted almost everyone except for the Brian Kendrick. He's our new number 4, just below Jello and Dawson's Creek, until Gonzalez returns. At this point, it seems like this team is going on a revenge tour this season. They already took down Syracuse, they beat down USF. This week it's Louisville, who beat them last season in a game that came down to the final minutes. Here's their chance to show that last season was a gas leak year. Just like last week, West Virginia gave a stomping. Louisville didn't have a chance. Once again, Pat White had an incredible game, having 1 incomplete pass over 200 yards. I think this new scheme fits him very well. Gwaltney on 25 carries had over 200 yards. That's over 8 yards a carry. This dude is insane. Virgin Rivers led the team in receiving this week, while this defense had another great performance. 5 sacks in the game, all by Hathaway Wright and Dingle McCringleberry. I'm beginning to think this team is legit. So does the ranking committee. They now have us at number 14th in the nation. Unfortunately, it cost us 2 more players on the roster. Defensive tackle Liebig for the entire season. This one hurts because we don't have any depth behind him. We'll also be out at right tackle. Rucker will miss the next 6 weeks. He was injured last season. Just like last season, Bassler will be his replacement for the time being. In more defensive tackle news, 4-star defensive tackle Kevin Britt has decided to give us a Brexit from his list, while 3-star outside linebacker Joe Vincent has set up a visit with the team, along with 3-star strong safety Clinton Collier. They both are scheduled for a meeting during our matchup against Connecticut. We're now just over the halfway point. A win will guarantee another winning season, since at this point a bowl game is almost guaranteed for us. We'll be taking on our first opponent since week 3 that is out of our conference, UAB. It's a slobber knocker out there. There doesn't seem to be a team that can slow down the Mountaineers. The closest game was the first one, where they were down in the first half to Navy by a single point. Pat White with another good performance, close to 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. The defense gave up over 300 yards in the air, but even then, they picked him off twice. Walter White with another 200-yard game on the ground and 2 touchdowns. His Madden rating better be off the charts when he goes to the NFL. Dawson's Creek and Virgin Rivers led the team in receiving, and I'll be honest, that's the greatest receiving duo name ever. Ass Crack Magro had another dominant game, 6 tackles, 5 of them for loss, 2 sacks. This defense has done a complete 180 compared to last season. We're now back in the top 10 for the first time since year 1, week 11. This team is much more dominant than that one. The problem is the injuries, and if you haven't already noticed, in the box right there, Dingle McCringleberry is now on the list. Gonzalez should be back after this week. Rucker will still be out for another month, while Liebig will finish his college career on the injury list. That means true freshman Steve Harris will be starting in place of McCringleberry until he returns, which will most likely be the bowl game. More recruiting news, we were able to schedule a visit with the 4-star center Kevin Rogers. The beauty about him is that we figured out what his interest was, which is playing time. He's not going to get that unless he's really good, but I decided to pitch that on his visit anyways, which will be when we take on Connecticut. Joe Vincent's visit is also this week, and we were able to find his interest, which was location. That'll be pitched to him this week on his visit to Connecticut. Now I push Clinton Collier's visit from this week to next week against Pittsburgh. I wasn't able to find a positive pitch and was hoping that another week will give me enough time to find a good one. It'll be my last chance as he's already scheduled with 2 other teams after. We've beaten Connecticut each season in this series. They are the current reigning, defending, undisputed Big East champions, but we're looking to take that title back. It starts by beating them this week. For the first time this season, the West Virginia Mountaineers didn't score more than 30 points in a game. They looked normal. It did become a shootout in a sense. Pat White with 300 in the air and 2 touchdowns. Secondary gave up close to 300, but they didn't allow a touchdown. Walt Disney with another good game on the ground. Ass Crack Magro with another good performance. 10 tackles, half of them for loss, and 2 sacks. Offense may have slowed down today in scoring, but the defense let them know, I got your back. The team is now up to number 9. We're slowly creeping up the rankings. This time I feel like they have earned it compared to year 1. We got Kevin Rogers. There's no guarantee that he'll be playing early, but we'll decide that once we find out his rating next season. Either way, he'll most likely be redshirted at some point. We also were able to recruit Joe Vincent at outside linebacker. He'll definitely be redshirted his first season. Good depth for the future. There's still plenty of other recruits who are interested in joining the team, like Aaron Washington. We're very desperate at defensive tackle. This will be a heavily recruited position in the offseason, but it'll be nice to have one player set on the roster before we get there. He's scheduled a visit during our Week 12 bye. Luke Coley is another defensive tackle that we're trying to recruit. Unlike Washington, we know what Coley is interested in, and that's location. We'll be using that as our pitch when he visits against Pittsburgh this week. At this point, I have no clue what Clinton Collier is interested in, and it'll be a complete shot in the dark. We can't reschedule any further as other teams have scheduled a visit to, and we'll be pitching a location. Hopefully that's all it takes. We're also in desperate need at defensive end. Both starters will be gone, and we have Nate Magruder scheduled for Week 12 during our bye. We also don't know what to pitch towards him. We're just buying time until we can figure it out. For the past 2 years, we've lost to Pittsburgh, and in each of those games, we've lost by 3 points. They're the only team in the conference that we have yet to beat. They're the monkey that needs to get off our back. We're a different team this season. Let's prove it. West Virginia trailed throughout the entirety of the game up until the final 2 minutes of the 4th quarter, when White connected with Gonzalez to give them their first lead in the game. For the first time in this series, I can finally put this in. This game was essentially a shootout, but more importantly, I think this was a real coming out party for Pat White. He put the team on his back and came back in the 4th quarter to win the game. He's the real deal. Gwaltney continuing to put up his standard numbers, close to 150 on the ground and 3 touchdowns. Tito Gonzalez having a coming out party too, with a 200-yard receiving and 3 touchdown performance. The defense also doing their job with 2 interceptions and 4 turnovers in total. Even though we won, we're still ranked 9th in the nation, and that's okay. The highest we've ever been ranked is 5 from our first year, but seeing how this season has gone, we might be there come bowl season. It looks like we won't be going into next season empty at defensive tackle. Coley has decided to commit to our team. He's a mountain of a man, 6'4", 300 pounds. He's also quick on his feet, and I can't wait to see what he can do on this defense. Even though we had no idea what Clinton Collier was interested in, he still decided to commit to us. Winning does make it easier for players to commit. He'll be competing for the starting spot next season at strong safety. The recruiting experience isn't quite over yet. We still have Magruder, who is coming on a visit this week, but we still have no idea what he's interested in. Another shot in the dark, took a chance at program prestige. Another player visiting this week will be Aaron Washington. Still no clue what he's interested in, took a chance at playing time. We're getting close to the end of the year and these injuries haven't made it easy for us. Chris Hunter will be out for the remainder of the season with a torn bicep. His replacement will be Figner at right guard. It's not a huge drop in skill. Injuries at the line have been a problem for us throughout this series. I don't see any real way to stop that. This will be our final bye week before we have our final stretch of games. During our week off, we managed to move up to the number 7 spot. This is the highest we've been in over 2 years. We're reaching the cream of the crop. There were no more recruitments, but we did get a soft verbal. Ohio State? I hate Ohio State. On to our final 2 games. Cincinnati has been one of the most improved teams in the conference. Last season, they just scraped on by us, but this team isn't the same team that they were last year. West Virginia has improved as well, and they're on a revenge tour. Have I mentioned that we're 1-4 against top 25 teams in this series? Well, we're now 1-5. I don't know what it is with ranked teams. We just seem to completely fall apart the minute we see a number next to their name. The worst part about this loss, Cincinnati went for 2 when they were up by 2 touchdowns. West Virginia failed to get the 2-point conversion on their first touchdown instead of kicking the extra point. This game was winnable, but the number next to Cincinnati made them choke. Pat White did the best that he could do. The entire team stepped up in the second half, but it was already too late. Gave up 400 in the air with 4 passing touchdowns. It's like they reverted back to last season. Walt Disney still has the magic in him, consistently putting up these insane numbers. Over 150 on the ground, 2 touchdowns, Virgin Rivers with a good performance. Team simply choked. That loss dropped us all the way down to 14th on the rankings. Reminds me of year 1 when all we had to do was beat Pittsburgh to earn the conference sweep, and they choked. In the end, it didn't matter. We'll still finish with the best conference record, and even if West Virginia loses their final game, they'll still be in first. We're unofficially the Big East champs, but we're not happy about it. Now, before we move on to the final week, I gave up on Aaron. I'm not going to let Ohio State hurt me again. I'm letting him go. Be free, you stupid defensive tackle. Go on, get out of here. Final game of the year should be a cakewalk, but you never know. Look at that. We're 2nd in points, 1st in offense, 1st in rush offense, 6th in defense, 9th in pass defense. It's only been 3 seasons, but I'm very proud of this team. The game was put away before the 4th quarter, but it was still scary seeing the final score. Another shootout with Pat White throwing for the most yards I think he's ever had in this series. Over 400 in the air, 4 touchdowns, 300 given up by our secondary, so much for that number 9 pass defense. Gwaltney was injured during the game, or they pulled him out after it was out of reach. Either way, he didn't get his usual stat line that he typically would get. Still managed 2 touchdowns while Tito led all the receivers in this game. I think he's poised for a really good season next year when he takes over as the number 1 in White's final year. Another shout out to the fantastic defense. Well, fantastic pass rush. That last one got us just outside the top 10 with the number 12 spot. There's still the championship week, giving us a chance to squeeze into the top 10 before bowl season. Before we finish the final week, Nate Magruder decided to go to Tennessee, which is a bummer since we needed a defensive end and he was the last one on our list. While Aaron went to Wisconsin. Suck on that, Ohio State! With that, here's the 15th and final week of the season, officially giving us the Big East title for the 2nd time in 3 years. I wish we had unbeaten. Cincinnati and gone undefeated, finishing in the top 5. Instead, we'll just have to put up with this consolation prize. We were able to get another strong safety, Reggie Wilson. Only a 3-star player, but that'll give us a chance to redshirt the weakest overall. But looking at his raw stats, those are purebred numbers right there. Championship week is here. Let's see if we can crawl up a bit higher before the bowl games. And there you go, we are officially in the Fiesta Bowl, taking on the number 3 Tennessee Volunteers while we sit at 11. I don't know why they keep putting us up against better teams. Number 5 Virginia in year 1, number 11 Texas in year 2. What's going on? This is why we're 0-2, soon to be 0-3 in bowl games. On a more upbeat note, Napier won the Remington. Who doesn't like a good Remming?
I'm Brad Nessler, and I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight in New York City for the presentation of the Heisman Trophy. As you all know, this is a very special award. The winner will go down in history with all the other former greats that have won this award before him. Ladies and gentlemen, your winner of this year's Heisman Trophy. Congratulations, young man, you've earned it.
I do think it's a bit unfair that Adrian Peterson had an extra game to pad out his stats. I still don't think Gwaltney would have won the award. Look at how many more votes he had than him. It's a lot. It does look like next season will be the year that Gwaltney could potentially win the Heisman. He wasn't even a 99 rating this year. He hasn't even begun to peak. It was his 3rd straight year as a starter, and Pat White continues to improve each season. We decided to focus less on running, and that allowed White to show off his arm a bit more, gaining almost 1,000 yards more than the past 2 seasons. His accuracy has been very good, but this season he almost hit the 80% mark while only throwing 3 interceptions. This was by far his most efficient season, and if he chooses to return next year, there is a chance he can take the team to a national championship. Now, let's not be fooled, as this team on offense revolves around Walt Disney. Came out hot as a true freshman, but wasn't able to stay healthy his first 2 seasons on the team. This was the only time he managed to play every game, and it allowed him to finish 2nd in the Heisman voting. There's a big chance that had we not changed the scheme to lighten the load on him, that he'd have over 2,000 on the ground. It is a double-edged sword. Maybe the lightened load is the only reason he wasn't injured this year. They'll need him to return next season if they want to make it to the championship game. The leading receiver on the team was Virgin Rivers. He's not the biggest receiver on the team, but he has heart. They had him as the number 12th best receiver in the nation, had very little playing time the past 2 seasons, but came out firing in his senior year on the team. 100 yards away from 1,000, 10 receiving touchdowns. He may not be the prototypical player you want, but he's a productive one. Tito Gonzalez was a player in his first year that I was putting a lot of stock in for the future. I think redshirting him as a freshman was a good idea. He'll be a junior next year, and if it wasn't for an injury that put him out for half the season, I believe he would have been the leading receiver. 600 yards and 6 touchdowns puts him 2nd on the team, averaging over 18 per catch. He's a big play receiver who's poised for an even bigger season next year. There was a surprise, and it was Jello. With the injury to Gonzalez, he had to come in as the number 2 receiver and did a decent job at it. 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, 400 of those were after the catch. Give him an inch and he'll take it a mile. Both Jello and Gonzalez have me excited to see how the passing offense improves next season. I thought there would have been an improvement towards the tight end position in the new scheme, but based on Sabri Thomas's stats, they're still not used very much. He was never really a playmaker before the new scheme changed, so I don't know why I expected more. The offensive line has always been a strength on the team. Zach Napier continues to show that strength, earning the Remington Award. He'll be graduating after this season, but he'll be going out on a high note, allowing only 3 sacks, and was always a decent depth player when having to come in to play prior to the season. John Bradshaw has improved again this season. Each year he continues to get better and better, earning a first team All Big East this season. He was considered the number 10th best offensive line this season, 3 spots below Napier. Next year, he'll be a senior. This team is coming close to hitting its peak. Another year, another injury prevented Adam Rucker from playing a full season. The true sophomore has been great when he's on the field. Hopefully in the next 2 seasons he can avoid injuries. He'll be healthy for the upcoming bowl game. You know who won't be healthy? Chris Hunter. He wasn't phenomenal when he was playing, but he's also a true freshman, by far the biggest weak link on the offensive line. Time will tell if he can develop into a better player. Ryan Stanchek earned himself a first-team All-Big East. This offensive line, for the most part, will be intact next season. Napier will be the only player graduating. Stanchek and Bradshaw will be seniors. Next year will truly be a boom or bust season for this offense. I do quickly want to talk about the Bass Man. The past 3 seasons, including this one, he's been a solid depth player who can reliably come in and play. With that being said, I'm going to start him at right guard while Chris Hunter is out for the bowl game. The reason for that is because I don't think the Fichtner man will be as good in the spot. In terms of performance, Bassler is clearly better than Fichtner. I think it's the right choice to reward the player who's playing well. Ass Crack Magro has been a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting him to come in and perform so well, but here we are with his 8 sacks and first team All-Big East. It's his only year starting on the roster, had some playing time before, but never really stood out until now. The second leading defender in sacks is Andre Wright. He could do no wrong with the 6 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. Add to it his 3 pass deflections, another senior player who had little to no play time the past 2 seasons and comes in to become a huge part of this year's success. He wasn't the only linebacker that was having success this season. Bobby Hathaway found ways to be an impact even as a backup, but he got the starting role this season and cranked it up to 11. How he was only second team All-Big East is beyond me, but we all know he's first team in our hearts. Let's be honest, I don't know what the difference is between starter Malik and backup Malik. They seemed to perform the same. This is a position that's always been strong, and this year was no different, earned a first-team All-Big East. This was the first year that CJ Thomas took over at free safety. This was a wild card position where I didn't know if he'll be able to claim the position as his own, but he did a good enough job to earn a second-team All-Big East. Either this conference sucks, or he's really good at what he does. Kozlowski earned a first-team All-Big East nod, only missing 2 kicks all season long, and one of those kicks that he made was a 56-yarder. Those aren't all easy kicks. He's clearly striving now as a kicker, and I expect him to continue to get better going into his next year. Our impact punter, Pat McAfee, had himself a down year in comparison to his previous season. His average was down, his net average was down, his longest was shorter, had less punts in the 20. Could just be a down year, but we'll see if he returns next year to compare his consistency. We were the 6th best coach. Had we not had that meltdown against Cincinnati, there could be a chance that we'd be in the national championship game, but instead we'll be taking on the number 3 Tennessee Volunteers. We're 1-5 against top 25 teams. We're 0-2 in bowl games. It's going to be an uphill battle. This game will prove we're not the same old Mountaineers. Our final team goal, by the way, is to beat Tennessee. Let's check them off the list, shall we? And if you're curious, yes, once again they decided to make us the second to last game, right before the national championship game. No pressure, right? We're the breather game again. On paper, we're not too far off from Tennessee, but we're still below them. Our defense are very similar in ranks. We both possess a strong running game with an average passing attack. This is about as even of a matchup you'll see. Let's get started. It's about to be a fiesta in this bowl with the Tennessee Volunteers taking on the West Virginia Mountaineers. One of the biggest problems this secondary had last year was stopping the big pass plays, and they give up one here early in the game, 63 yards to the house in the first quarter. But wait a minute, there's a flag, illegal touching by the receiver that will negate the big play. We skip to later in the first, West Virginia's ball. Last year they didn't have Pat White due to a suspension. This year they do, and he gets the first on the pitch option. What's interesting is West Virginia tends to use their backup running backs as the main back. Direct snap to Williams, and it works out for them here. The defender came in on the blitz, direct snap, catches him off guard, and there was a ton of green grass waiting for Williams. The drive slows down, 3rd and 8, White moves to his left, goes to the end zone. Gwaltney makes the catch but can't keep the foot in bounds. That'll force the kicker Kozlowski to come in and attempt a 40-yarder, only missed 2 all season long, makes this one to get the first points in the game. Towards the end of the first, West Virginia with the ball again. Pat White throws over the middle, but it gets picked off by McCoy, setting up Tennessee in field goal range. First play after the interception, play action, and sacked by Malik. Came in unblocked. Doesn't get any easier than that for a defender. Second down, play action again, but the pressure forces a rushed pass knocked down by Griffith. It's now third down. They have yet to convert one in the game. Throws and it's completely off the mark, incomplete. Shockingly, instead of kicking a field goal, they punt it. The sack by Malik might be the difference between a tie right now. West Virginia has 2 elite running backs. Makes plays like these hard to cover. Williams has the edge, has the first down, and tackled near the 40. A few plays later on 3rd and 13, the offensive line holds long enough for Pat White to find Davis, the backup tight end, who is a natural left tackle. It gets them into field goal range, shows you the trust they have in Sabry Thomas when they're throwing to the backup left tackle. The drive would eventually stall out, leading to a 45-yard attempt. Kozlowski made one from 40 in the first quarter, but can't make this one. We now skip to the second half, score still the same. Play action, White throws back to Williams, defenders can't make the play and give up the first on 3rd. The following play, Walter White is feeling it, takes it up the middle, runs over a defender and gets the first down. The next play, they go back to Walt Disney, makes some magic happen, breaks a tackle, hurdles a defender, and somehow turned it into something. This entire drive has been all Williams and Gwaltney. Pat White pitches it to Gwaltney to come a yard short of the first. It's now 3rd and short. Both players are feeling it. Pat White hands it to Gwaltney. Looks like a pitch option, and if he pitches it, I think it goes all the way. They're now at the 24. Another direct snap to Williams. Tennessee has been struggling to stop the run, and he almost broke away on that one. They're now at the 10. Another direct snap, this time to Gwaltney. Makes a move, tries to break a tackle, and down at the 2-yard line. The following play, Williams is feeling it and he takes it in for an easy touchdown. The Mountaineers are now up 10-0. We now go to the fourth quarter. West Virginia crumbled last year in the fourth. This year looks like the same. Big pass over the middle of the field for the first. They rush back to the line. It's a pitch right side, turned into a reverse, squeezes through into open space across midfield. He had one guy to beat but couldn't make him miss. It's now 3rd down. The quarterback is feeling it, finds a receiver over the middle for the first. A couple of plays later, in the pocket, free rusher to the end zone, and it's caught! They said he was in bounds, but I don't know about that. It looked like he didn't get that foot in. It's now 10-7 Mountaineers with the lead still. All West Virginia needs to do is run the clock down, and Tennessee isn't given an inch. Second down, they go back to Williams, and again he's tackled behind the line. Third down to end the game for the Mountaineers. White in the pocket, pressure getting there, and Gwaltney can't keep his feet in bounds, incomplete. Now lead to the impact player, Pat McAfee, to come out, trying to pin them deep, but it'll be hard when you're almost at your own goal line. It'll be returned from the 25 and down at the 34. This is either the game-winning drive for the Volunteers or the game-ending drive for the Mountaineers. On second down, they decide to run up the middle, makes a cut, and he gets across midfield. They're getting closer to field goal range at the 47. This will get them to the 42. 2nd and 5 with less than a minute to go in the game. He moves out right, throws across his body, and it's tipped away by CJ Thomas. Griffith decides to celebrate in his place. It's 3rd and 5, a few more yards to get into field goal range. Pressure gets there, he loses the ball, and it's recovered by the Mountaineers. Dingle McCringleberry with the recovery, and Senior Dykes was the guy who got the sack that forced the fumble. And for the first time in this series, the West Virginia Mountaineers have won a bowl game. Is that the end of this series? I don't think so. But they do take a lot longer to edit, so don't expect them to come out as quickly as the 2K5 ones. Look at that glorious trophy. It's magnificent. But like I said, this series isn't over. We have to try and get the natty. We also got job offers from 2 other teams, Florida and Florida State. They're both appealing offers, and if this was just a series to see how far it can take a coach from a really bad team to a really good one, I would be switching. But our story is West Virginia, and it isn't over yet. We have been given an invitation to the ACC. Find out next time if I'm going. We're about to go to where the big boys play. One last thing before I end the video. Thank you for the member who continues to support the channel financially, ONT6 Soldier. Thank you to anyone who also subscribed, likes, and watched this video all the way through. I know it can be a lot, but I did shortchange you all in the second part. I'll see you all in year 4.